Hello, it's Lisa Hiles with my B1 course. It's lesson 37, which is of an IELTS score of about 4.5, and those of you who are intermediate level learners should find this helpful. Today's topic is telling a story, and it's a vocabulary lesson, but the focus is on adverbs. And it's adverbs to make your stories more interesting. Okay? I hope you enjoy it. Let's have a look at the first slide. Okay. In some speaking exams, like for example the PET, the First Certificate, or IELTS, of course, you have to tell a story that you either create, you make up, or a true story about something that happened to you. This is sometimes called a personal anecdote. Okay, here are some pictures on the right about some of the things that you may be asked to talk about. So the examiner will say, for example, tell me about a holiday you had. Which picture do you think that is? Of course, it's the seaside, the lovely cove, sandy cove. A difficult journey. Tell me about a difficult journey you had. For example, here's a difficult journey with a car crash. Okay, tell me about a perfect day you've had. Well, that could be a day with your family, couldn't it? They look pretty happy. A special event in your life. What do we call this picture here on the bottom left? Do you remember? It's when you finish university. That's right, it's graduation. Yep, so that's a graduation ceremony, or about a birthday you remember. So those are the topics that you might have to talk about for 1 minute, in a PET or an IELTS exam. Okay, so let's see what I'm going to do with this today. I'd like you to read the story below and tell me what's the anecdote about. So choose from the example tasks in the lead-in. So is it about a birthday, a special event, a difficult journey? Is it about a holiday you had, or something else? Here we go. It was just after midnight on the 31st of December last year. I was driving home from a friend's house. Fortunately, the road was quiet and the weather was cold but calm. Suddenly, a young boy stepped out in front of me. He was wearing a red coat and a blue scarf. Immediately, I tried to stop the car, but it was too late. Obviously, I thought I had hit him, so I got out of the car and looked under it. Surprisingly, there was nothing there. As I looked for the boy, I felt a cold wind on my face, and I had the strange feeling that someone was near me. I called the police. Eventually, 2 officers came to help me. After about an hour or so, they didn't react at all to my story, which was very weird. They both remained silent. Finally, one of the officers said, "A boy was killed in a car crash on this road in December 1980. Since then, several people have seen his ghost here." Okay, so what does this story describe? That's right, it describes a car journey, doesn't it? A difficult car journey. Did you enjoy my story? Why or why not? Do you believe such things can happen? Why? Why not? And what about the words in green? Okay, did you notice those as you were reading the story? What about the words in green? Let's just go back to the beginning. What about the words in green here? Fortunately, suddenly, immediately, obviously, surprisingly, eventually, finally. What type of words are they? Are they nouns, verbs, adjectives, or adverbs? Of course, they are adverbs. So they describe the verb. They give you additional information, extra information about the verb. Do you think they make my story more interesting? Well, that's their role. They're there to make the story more interesting for the listener and the reader. Yeah, very common in writing. And of course, if you want to get a higher score in your exams, then it's great to be able to use them. So let's have a look at the next task. Here they are. There are 10 of them. And there are 10 definitions. So 5 on this page and 5 on the next slide. And you have to put the adverb with its definition, match the adverb with its definition. Let's do the first one together. Okay, so number 1, we use when something happens very quickly and in an unexpected way. Which adverb do we use when something happens quickly, very quickly, and in an unexpected way? So in a way that isn't usual. That's right, it's suddenly. Suddenly. Okay? Shall we go back to the text? Let's go back to the text. Here we go. Suddenly, shall I say that again? Suddenly, a young boy stepped out in front of me. So I was driving the car, okay, watching the road very carefully, and suddenly, bang, a boy steps out in front of me. Did it happen quickly? Yes. Did I think a boy will step out? No. Okay, so it's unexpected. It's something unusual, suddenly. Okay, so let's go back to the definitions tasks, please. Here we go. Number 2, we use what when something happens slowly over a long time. If you don't know these, pause the slide now so you can look them up in your dictionaries or on your phone. Number 3, we use what when something happens because of good luck. Number 4, we use which adverb when something happens because of bad luck? So the opposite. Which adverb do we use when we are talking about something that is easy to see, easy to understand, or easy to recognise? Okay, here comes number 6. Which adverb do we use when something happens that causes surprise? And number 7, which adverb do we use when something happens that is expected or usual? So not a surprise. Big clue there. Number 8, which adverb do we use when something happens at once without delay? Number 9, which adverb do we use when something happens in the end or at some time later? And finally, number 10, which adverb do we use when something happens at the end of a long time period or for the last action in a series of actions? Stop the slide there if you need more time, because the next slide is the answer slide, of course. Here we go. So we use suddenly when something happens very quickly and in an unexpected way. Number 2, when something happens slowly over a long time, we use gradually. Gradually. When something happens because of good luck, number 3, we use fortunately. Fortunately. And the opposite, when something happens because of bad luck, we use unfortunately. Unfortunately. We use obviously when we are talking about something that is easy to see, easy to understand, or easy to recognize. Surprisingly is used when something happens that causes surprise. And unsurprisingly is used when something happens that is expected or usual. We use immediately when something happens at once without delay. And we use eventually when something happens in the end or at some later time. And we use finally when something happens at the very end of a long time period. So it's the last action, it's the last event of a series, or when you're writing your IELTS essays or what would you call them, written assignments, finally is your last paragraph. Yeah, it's your last argument. How did you find that? How was that for you? So there are 10 adverbs. Some of them were in the story, so you could guess their meaning a bit from the context in the story. Okay. And there were your definitions for you. So you can use your dictionaries, your phones, you can use my definitions there. Please record them, especially the ones that are new to you, and try to use them. Try to use them in your writing first, okay? And then slowly they will come through in your speaking. Shall we have a look at what the next task is? Let's have a look. Task 3. So here's how to pronounce the adverbs. So it's the phonemic script, isn't it? Here's how to say the words, but how do you write them? So what's the word? Let's have a look at the first one together. And which adverb from the table do you think that that is? Can I come in here? Ah, hello. So the first one, what do you think the adverb is? If you try to read the phonemic symbols, the sounds. That's right, surprisingly. Yep, repeat after me. Surprisingly. Surprisingly. Good. The next one. Suddenly. Suddenly. The next one. Fortunately. Fortunately. The next one. Gradually. Gradually. Next one. Immediately. Immediately. The next one. Finally. Finally. The next one, eventually, eventually. And then obviously, obviously. Here we are, we should have them. There they are. So you can see that the written word, this written form, is not always the same way as you pronounce it in English. So particularly if you look at fortunately, it's not fortunately, it's fortunately, fortunately. Gradually, not gradually, gradually. Immediately, eventually, eventually. Can't even say it properly myself. Let me say it again. Eventually and obviously. Okay? I hope you find that helpful. Right, let's have a look at task 4. So task 4 is the story again that I told you in task 1 and that you read about my difficult journey that I had. But I have taken out the adverbs. Without looking back at the slide for task 1, please try to remember the adverb that goes in the gaps. Okay? So I'm going to come out of that. You read the story to yourself and choose the correct adverb for the gap. Okay, here's the next part of the story. Because the final paragraph, here it is. So here's the final paragraph. Okay, obviously you can go back and check your answers. I'm going to give you the answers now. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. I meant to do that. So the first gap is fortunately. Second gap is suddenly. The third, immediately. The fourth gap, obviously. The next, surprisingly. Eventually is the next gap. And the last gap is finally. Okay, you can go back to task 1 and read the story again with the answers with the adverbs inside. Okay, in the correct places. Okay, here comes the final task now for you. And I'd like you to tell your own story about a journey that you had. And I'd like you to do this in writing first. It only has to be short. Yes, maybe you could do 8 to 10 sentences. Okay, try to include as many of today's adverbs as possible. If you like, you can use the sentence stems, the sentence beginnings below to help you. So for your story, why not start with, it was just after on last year. So this is asking you about time. So in my story, it was just after midnight on the 31st of December last year. You might decide that yours was just after dawn, 4 in the morning on the 6th of June in 2016, for example. I don't know, I don't mind. You decide on a date. I was driving home from where? When suddenly, what happened? I was with my friends, family, work colleagues, boss, husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend. You decide. Parents, or maybe I was alone. Unfortunately, so there something bad happens, because of bad luck. Unfortunately, I had an accident, or unfortunately, the car broke down, so it stopped working. Or maybe you're on a boat or on a bike, I don't know, it's up to you, or a flight, an aeroplane. We immediately, so you did something really quickly, without delay, and gradually, slowly, after a period of time, something happens. So gradually, something happens slowly after a time period. Eventually, something happens in the end. And then, finally, that's the last action moment or event in your story. Okay? Thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed the lesson. That was on adverbs for telling stories or anecdotes, and I look forward to seeing you again next time. Thanks very much. Bye.